Is your board boring, or are they out there full of passion, evangelizing your mission and asking others to support you? Whether you're seeking out new board members or you'd like to see more life from your existing board members, it's important to make sure that you set clear expectations for the role and provide the necessary training they need to be on fire for your mission. Otherwise, your board members may think they're doing their job just by showing up for quarterly meetings. In today's episode, we'll talk about how you can help your board members actively engage with your mission, become great fundraisers, and inspire others. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Jeff Schreifels, and I've got Karen Kendrick here with me today. We often get questions about the role of your board in fundraising efforts. In many organizations, there's a lack of clarity about what the role of the board should be and their important connection to fundraising. So to address some of these challenges, we hosted a live webinar learning call a few months ago from our Veritas Group Academy participants on the connection between your board and your fundraising efforts. And Renita Tyson, a client experience leader here with us at Veritas, and who has successfully worked with many nonprofit boards over the years, led the learning call. And it was such a hit that we had to have her and invite her to join us on the podcast to share more about creating a thriving partnership between your board and your fundraising. So welcome, Renita.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Renita, let's get started with a little bit of introduction about you, because you've got a lot of experience. So tell us about your experience in fundraising.
Yeah, I've been around for a minute. I have worked with corporate America, the nonprofit sector. I like to say I've worked for pretty much every entity except for the government. I started my career with IBM, and then I worked for a division of Johnson & Johnson. I worked in higher education at UCLA. I've worked with a number of nonprofit organizations. I have worked with boards. I've been on boards. I'm on a board right now, so I have to actually live up to my word. So yes, I've had a lot of different experiences.
I love that, Renita. We love at Veritas benefiting from all your different experiences and all your wisdom. So thank you.
Definitely.
So let's start talking a little bit about some of the problems and challenges that come up related to board development and the role of fundraising on boards. So Renita, I know this is a passion of yours. So what are some of the main issues you're seeing?
I think some of the issues really result around lack of clarity. The roles of the board or the expectations are not clearly defined. They don't necessarily mention a role in fundraising. They may be thinking it, but they don't necessarily state it. The board may not be clear about its purpose and its role in fundraising. They may not really understand the connection that they have to the strategic role in the organization and what that means in terms of their expectations and needs for fundraising. And also when you're identifying new board members and bringing them on, are you clear about what you're bringing into the organization and what they are thinking their role is? So you've got to make sure that everybody is properly, the expectations are properly set, and that the training is in place for true board involvement and engagement.
Why do you think we're not doing that very well, Renita? Are we nervous about talking about fundraising? Like, what do you think's happening?
That certainly can be the case. And sometimes boards evolve. They may have started off as an advisory board, and over time, leadership sees the need for having the board more engaged in fundraising, but it's not clearly stated. So the needs are evolving. They may do presentations and hope that the board gets it. But if you don't really come out and ask, then many times that piece is missed.
A lot of the things that you mentioned, I guess we have this bias from the nonprofit organization side that the board is just not good enough, or they're not meeting the expectations. But everything you've talked about here is that the nonprofit is not doing the job of setting the expectations, giving them the vision, helping them understand what their role is. This is the nonprofit's, in a sense, fault if we're not getting good board members, right? It's
absolutely
not that these board members are bad. It's that we as nonprofits aren't doing a good job bringing them on board.
And telling
Right?
them what we need them to do.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, your board is there, they're serving on your board because they have some interest and connection in the viability of the organization. So you do your board a big disservice in not making it very clear on how they can help maintain that viability. There's no question about it. The financial resources needed to deliver the mission are essential, and the board member is the most influential aspect of the whole nonprofit's realm in
Yeah.
terms of how that financial piece gets delivered. They
Yeah.
have to play a role.
So, how can nonprofit leaders and fundraisers advocate and support shifting how the board thinks about fundraising?
You know, I think it really starts with knowing the motivations of your board, you know, uncover why they're a part of your board. Just like we ask our donors, you know, how did you get connected to the organization? How are you connected to the mission? You want to know that same information from your board member, like why are they serving on your board?
Yeah.
And again, it's the nonprofit's role to provide the education. So whatever the board doesn't know about the organization has a responsibility to make sure that they know these things. And, you know, your board all has some sphere of influence. Help them be willing to tap into their sphere of influence. And also, you know, help them with the resources that they need in order to do an effective job of representing your organization to their sphere of influence. And, you know, brainstorm with them about ways that they can connect their network to the organization. How can they, you know, bring more people to know about the great work that the organization is doing?
Yeah. Well, let's assume that you have a board member who's willing and open to participate in fundraising. When should you bring a board member into that conversation? What role should they be playing in asking for a gift, in your opinion?
I think it depends on the board member. You need to understand that board member's skill set, their knowledge about the organization, their knowledge about whatever donor that you're bringing them in contact with, and their comfort level. And if they don't have that, then you know they can learn in coming alongside you at the call on the visit with the donor. They can learn some of these things, but they should have some role in that conversation. So if they don't know enough, maybe they can just serve as an advocate on why they're so excited to serve on the board. That's always a good thing to have them do.
Yeah.
But they need to be comfortable enough to really speak effectively to the donor. You want to make sure that they have stories to share. So many times we can help them be more prepared by giving them some examples of things they can share, some great victories that took place, some great accomplishments that the organization has realized, and they can effectively and enthusiastically share that information with the donor just to, you know, kind of really represent themselves and represent the organization very effectively in their role.
You know, Renita, I think a lot of times we'll say we want board members to, you know, help us out with fundraising, but we don't make it really easy and clear. Like we don't give them the tools, we don't give them a clear list, we don't tell them expectations. And so it's all kind of this, we're hoping they show up one day at our office and say, what can I do? But we need to make it really easy for them to accomplish, have everything, all the tools and the education they need, right?
We do. If you're bringing a board member, you know, they're taking time out of their day to come alongside you for a meeting with a donor, they have to know what to expect. They need to know more about who they're meeting. You know, tell me some information about this donor. You know, why are we meeting with them? What are they interested in? You know, what connections do I have with the work that the donor's doing, or some aspect of the donor's being that I can, you know, kind of connect. And you want to find some points of connection so that they can kind of key in on that and mention it if that exists between the board member and the donor that you're going to be bringing them to. And, you know, you need to give them a good background. They need to be prepared with whatever viable information is going to be needed to share with the donor about the work of the organization. So maybe they have a particular interest area. Give them some interest, you know, some interesting information about recent victories, recent things that have developed that are pertinent to the conversation. They need to feel prepared. And it's the nonprofit's role. It's their responsibility to make sure the board member is fully prepared. So when the conversation, you know, evolves, they're not hearing things for the first time that they should have known coming into the meeting. You want everybody to feel prepared. If they're there to help you, you got to prepare them to help.
Yeah.
And asking what they need to be prepared, right? Because everybody's got a different personality and need. Well, I want to flip that for a minute, Renita. What if I have that board member that wants to be involved in fundraising and they're awful at it? They dominate, they talk the whole time, they suck the air out of the room. Like, what advice do you? I'm sure someone's asking that question if they're listening.
You've got to be real clear about the dynamic you're creating between yourself, the board member, and the donor. So sometimes it's good to maybe set the tone with the board member before you meet. Here's how we see this this whole dynamic going on. Share with them how you envision the call to go, how you envision the meeting to go. So share what you'd like them to contribute, and really be defined about how you want them to participate. You can give them some specific questions to ask. You can say, at this point, I'll do this. Lay it out for them in terms of how you see that meeting unfolding, so that they don't feel that, oh, there's a lull in the conversation, I've got to jump in and fill this void. Let them know that we're going to be comfortable with some space, but let them know clearly that you have a plan in terms of how this conversation can evolve, and let them know how you want them to participate in the conversation.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Something I love about a permission-based asking model is you're clear on your roles, and one of them is the MGO is a facilitator of the meeting. So you're like,
Yes.
look, I'm going to keep the meeting going, so I may have to cut you off at times. I know you like to talk. I appreciate all you bring. So that helps you. There's some tools to help you have some structure for there as well.
Yeah, they need to know what to expect and what you're expecting of them, so they don't feel like they have to take, complete control.
Yeah.
Love it.
We get this question a lot from a lot of blog readers around giving and the board. And, what if there are issues with a board member's ability to give? How do you handle that?
I think it depends on why that board member was brought onto the board to begin with. Many times, board members will bring in board members, and their defined role is to be that community liaison. So they're bringing the needs of the community or their connections with the community, and they may or may not have deep enough pockets to contribute at whatever the minimum giving level is, but that going in. And you try to make sure that they don't feel the pressure when you're talking about the financial obligation of the board. You're clear with them about what their obligation is. They're doing something, they're bringing a different value to the board dynamic than just the money. But other than that, the board member should have a financial responsibility. And if there's some extenuating circumstances, talk to the board member and make sure you understand clearly, what it is they want to contribute. And if that's something that really does work for the nonprofit. Sometimes you start off at one level and you may end up at a different level. And if that no longer is a good match, then both entities need to agree. And it doesn't mean you love them any less. It's just that the role that you thought they were going to play, or maybe the role they thought they were going to play, has shifted. And if it has shifted, then sometimes you bless and release.
But how do you decide what the minimum should be?
I think that's a conversation that gets developed with the board. It can't just be top down, and it can't be one group saying this is what it needs to be. Everybody has to buy in. So, you look and see what the needs are, and then you talk with each individual board member and find out, what it is they really are committing to doing. So, you can put together a board plan for each one of your board members at the very onset of the fiscal year, or at the beginning of their engagement on the board, and just really make sure we're clear about what their expectations are, what they're expecting their contribution to be over what period of time, so that there's no surprises. The worst thing is to have one person with this set of expectations, another person with this ability, and they're not talking, and there's this disruption here, and nobody's really talking about it. You've got to be clear.
Yeah. There are a lot of nonprofit organizations that wanted to diversify their board. And it's important that we do this. But what recommendations do you have for those organizations who are wanting to diversify?
Well, I think when you look at the need to diversify, that's kind of where it starts. I know in a lot of instances, you have nonprofits who are serving a community that is not reflected at all by the board leadership. And what we're finding is many funders these days are expecting to see some representation of your constituents on your board. If you don't have that, then you've got to ask yourself, how can we fill this void? Because that's a void. That's a gap that really speaks to how you're going to be delivering whatever your mission is. You know, if no one on the board is reflective of the constituents you're serving, there's probably going to be some misses between your best intentions and how you're delivering things and how it's received by the people that you're serving. And you want to make sure that everybody feels like they're being well served and well addressed and well respected.
Yeah.
But you can't really engage with people you don't know. So it's on the board's list to find ways to connect with the communities and the constituent groups that they need to engage, to be reflective of who they're serving, and also to just be reflective of the greater community that they're in. So if they don't know people in, let's say, it's ethnic communities, well, you know, the best thing to do is to find ways to make those bridges. If you have staff members who are members of those communities, you can ask them, you know, who are some prominent people in these communities that you respect and why? You can also connect with some of the ethnic chamber of commerces. You know, there's in many organizations, many communities, there's a Black chamber of commerce. There might be a Hispanic chamber of commerce. If those are constituent groups that you need to engage, find ways to connect with them. Find out who's on their board. Find out who's in leadership in these chamber of commerces, and then see how you can make those connections. You've got to know people if you're going to bring them on, and you have to be authentic in your communication and connection with them, and let them know you want to expand your board and bring on people that are really, you know, core to the group that you serve, and you think that they have something that's valuable to contribute, and start having those conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not showing up once and saying, I want a diverse board. It's showing up, building relationships, spending time, building trust, just like any other relationship.
Absolutely.
So many times
And
it happens like that. Well, I asked and nobody showed up. Well, you know.
Yeah.
If you show up once, that's not necessarily commitment. It's just like we do with our donors. They need to see you, and they need to feel that, you know, that you really are sincere about your wanting to engage with them, and that you're not just trying to fill a slot or fill a quota. Nobody wants to feel like they're the diversity person on the board because that's the slot we needed to fill.
Right.
They really need to have a role that you respect and that you're going to honor, and that they can actually utilize the talents and the connections that they have in those communities to help broaden the understanding and the influence of the board.
Yeah.
And many communities will have like three African-American folks who are on all the boards that everybody knows. Don't do that. They have so many boards they're trying to manage. You know, really get to know the relationships and build those in the community over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And find others, because those three people are working really hard, and they're probably going to say no. There's like, everyone has already asked me, and you're late to the party. So, you know, you're going to have to look outside of just those three people. Absolutely.
Definitely.
So let's back up for a minute, Renita. You've talked about, you know, how we need to be clear on our communication about what we're wanting and needing around fundraising. You've given us some great ideas around some of that. So if I come in to an organization or I'm transitioning my board, where do I start? How do I think about moving into a board that helps with fundraising? What are some strategies there that you found are helpful?
The best place to start is with board orientation. When you're bringing the board on, you know, fundraising needs to be a strong piece of what you're going to cover, the what, the why, and the how. You can certainly set up training sessions like a fundraising 101 for your board members, and take them through the pieces that they need to know and the way you want to go about connecting with donors and bringing those funds into the organization, so that they're clear about what it has to be. Let's face it, if you're not a professional fundraiser, many times that's the one thing that people don't want to do. And if you don't make them comfortable doing it, it's very easy to just pivot to things that are making you comfortable, and then that never gets done. And then the funds don't get raised, and then nobody's happy. And so let's fix that. Let's train the board members to do the things that we know that they can do.
That's
Remember
awesome.
when I was a DOD at a university, the board had never given. And so I had board members that I found that were in support of this, and they led the charge in communicating all of that really directly. And I think that helped a lot, because, you know, and finding those resources to be really clear about what you want. First, decide, what does it look like? What does it mean? What are all the parameters? get some expertise before you go in and start to change a culture, and get those allies aligned with you who are board members.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the best ways to do it is get those champions on your side and help them help you influence the board to do maybe a deeper dive in fundraising, or really expand and pivot to doing more in fundraising. It can't just be you talking to the board. The board has to be your partner in this, and get board partners to help partner with other board members to help change that dynamic and shift the mindset and get them enthusiastic about fundraising.
Yeah. Well, this has been great stuff. Thank you, Renita, for joining us today on this episode. I hope this is giving you a lot to think about and consider as you explore how to create a thriving partnership with your board. And if you have questions about engaging your board in fundraising efforts, you have to check out our free white paper called How Nonprofit Boards Contribute to Major Gift Fundraising Success. And that link is available in the show notes. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.